Hey, y'all. Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Night Shift. We're doing a little different. It's a Monday. I almost said Happy Tuesday. I'm conditioned. We've got actually a show we're going to tomorrow night. So we're not going to be able to, we could have pre-recorded and dropped tomorrow night, but we enjoy it when you guys are in the chats and we get to talk to you a little bit. So even if just a few of you show up, it'll be worth it. And I think that I perform better in front of an audience. Like
a lot.
If I think that there's like even 2 people in the chats listening to what I'm saying, I do a little bit better, I think. But it's not about that. We're just here and happy to be here tonight and to present to you a case. It's kind of an interesting case tonight. So for those of you who might be new here, Night Shift is a true crime podcast. So I am Andrea. The handle is Andrea Up Late, and my co-host is BC Sanders. BC is a retired homicide lieutenant, and so he brings a lot of expertise to these matters when we're talking about these cases. Now, we often do unsolveds. In fact, I would venture to say most of the time they are unsolveds. But not always. Tonight is just that. It's actually a disappearance, and you guys are going to decide what you think at the end. Is this someone who is doing a really good job of missing and starting a new life, or is it somebody who met a very different fate one night back in 2006? So we're going to talk about the case of Brian Shaffer here in a moment. For some of you guys in like the crimey world that listen to a lot of these cases, if you're familiar with Maura Murray, that's a pretty talked about case of a woman in very kind of strange circumstances, disappearing, like vanished without a trace kind of thing. Then this is along those lines. We've got someone in the chat that said not a ski type of disappearance. I'm going to go on and address 2 things here. Again, another time, if you are just new to this show, this is a live YouTube show every week, generally speaking on Tuesdays at 8, 7 Central on the Andrea Up Late YouTube channel. We also drop and stream to podcasts. So wherever you listen, your Spotify, your iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, all that stuff. So you can listen to us wherever. You will, however, occasionally, depending on the case, hear us engaging with the chat. So that just means that you can log on, create a free YouTube account, and hop in the chats when we're live and ask questions about the cases or carry on conversations. We have a lot of regular friends. And Ski, that was just mentioned, is actually the co-host of the Disruptors podcast with BC and Ski. That would be the BC that we have here with us. BC, would you like to touch on that, or are you guys going to do your own thing? Because...
yeah,
I'm starting to hear that they think that the bones in my closet are actually that of Ski's. And while I do always enjoy new content for Tuesdays,
yes,
I'm not going that far.
No,
maybe.
We'll keep it a mystery for right now.
Okay.
However, everything is good, so everybody that loves drama in the world, just relax,
settle down.
No drama. He's got some really cool stuff going on that he will probably make an announcement at some point, here sooner probably than later. So I don't want to steal his thunder.
Of course not. No, Ski's great. Everything is good. We will have some developments over there, but it is all on the... Unlike my hair, it's all on the up and up right now.
Do you need to tell the listeners why? What's going on or no?
What, with my hair? Well, no, because they can't see it, thankfully. Okay.
It looks great.
Well, it's going to be just fine is what it's going to be. Okay, guys, welcome back. We are super happy to have you. Again, and until something big comes of this, I'm probably going to preface every show with Grant Solomon. And so if you listen to the 3-part series that we did on Grant Solomon, an 18-year-old young man that was that passed away in Franklin, Tennessee, or actually in a city surrounding Franklin back in 2020, it's an unresolved circumstance. It's a case that needs to be opened as an investigation into murder. And we have been working closely with his mother, and there are other outlets covering this. And anyway, essentially, we kind of speak on it every time, because if you haven't watched or listened to those, go back, listen to my coverage, and BC's, go find your own. It's being shared, thankfully, everywhere now. It's getting a lot of media attention. And that is a more recent development that it's kind of exploded in this sense. So that's fantastic. And that's what's needed for that family to get some justice for Grant. So you can find a lot of things about Grant on Instagram. And like I said, just Google Grant Solomon. It's all O's when you do. But anyway, so definitely go back and listen to those, and just know that we will be updating you. We are every day. Some new things are kind of coming out on that. So we'll keep you guys posted on that for sure. Some things have changed since, what's different since last week? Oh, we have O.J. Simpson passed away.
Yes.
Since last week. So that's interesting. If I were to also encourage you to listen to something, it would be Nicole Brown Simpson's 911 call the night that she was murdered. If you ever had any questions or doubts or wondered anything. And then I would also go back and watch an interview with O.J. Simpson. You can type in, if you just Google it, type in the word hypothetical, like O.J. Simpson hypothetical killer. And it's an interview where he's discussing the book he wrote that was entitled If I Did It. And the whole premise is, quote, if he did it, how he would have gone about it in very minute detail. So just if you're still on the fence from that old 1994 case, then let's go back and listen to those things. But the case that we are talking about tonight, like I said, occurred in 2006. We do often like to do a little, not trivia, maybe some facts, pop culture facts, current crimes, whatever, things that might have happened in the year of the case that we are discussing. And that kind of helps jog our memory too, I think, as to what things were like. Because time goes by so quickly. Yes.
And then when you talk about it, a lot of times we put it with, at least me,
like music,
with music, movies, or technology now.
For sure. Well, and that's the biggest thing, I think. Like if we're looking at a case from 2006, in some bizarro world that is now almost 20 years ago. Yeah. Which is wild.
Yes.
In and of itself, but so much changes. And we know that. So when we are talking about true crime cases or unsolved things, and we know now we have the advent and the usage of all the cameras and all the, street cameras, home Ring doorbell cameras, etc. Those things didn't exist back then. And so that plays a big part in investigating a case. So my handy helper here, I think BC has found some stuff, huh?
So technology is crazy, kind of like one of the #1 hits in 2006.
You made me crazy. Yeah. Was that 2006?
Yeah. Gnarls Barkley. Charles Barkley's nephew. Or cousin. Okay. Yeah, cousin. No, I don't know any about that. No, but so Gnarls Barkley.
Did you like that song?
I did at first because it had a different kind of sound, but then kind of very quickly, it was a little bit old. It was like it was kind of worn out very quickly. Yeah. And I was just like,
Okay, what else you got?
Yeah. James Blunt.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
You're beautiful. You're beautiful. Yeah. Can I tell you something about me? Will you still be my co-host if I tell you something?
Yeah. You got me intrigued now.
Do you remember the time when we would pay for ringtones?
I do know people that have.
I know that you didn't.
I don't know how to do it, but yeah.
Back then, I mean, not now. Now I think everybody silences everything at all costs.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be hard to say it out loud. I probably paid like $1.99 a month to have that song as my ringtone, at least for like a few weeks.
Because it just was mellow, like whenever the phone rang,
to be fair, now I have no idea why I did it. I don't want to hear the song really. But I think at the time it was just all over. It was a big song. Yeah. And I liked it. I don't know.
The first ringtone I ever heard was a buddy of mine at work.
Okay.
And it was Fat Bottom Girls by Queen. So when someone would
Tell me that's not like when his wife called.
No. But it was his phone. Like when his phone would ring, that's what would play every time. And we laughed every time. But that's great. Yeah. I was never cool enough to know how to do the technology to do a ringtone. But the rest of the music for 2006 on the charts was pretty bad.
Oh, that was the best?
You got some Rascal Flatts.
Okay.
What Hurts the Most?
What hurts the most? I feel like we're one of those infomercials for like the 2 a.m. CD.
There's a fireplace in the background. Yeah. It's like the sounds of 2006. And nobody would want to buy that. Sorry. Here's one everybody will love. They're coming back. Nickelback. Far Away apparently was a hit. If you didn't know.
Oh, so far away. No, right?
I don't know that one. I mean, I can recognize.
No. I turned it. I got two songs. I often will mesh two different songs entirely, and that was wrong.
You can make a lot of money doing that.
It was
now,
wrong,
though.
but it's true. These things are coming back. The things that like were big at the time and then got made fun of and then became jokes of themselves have like pivoted all the way back around. So it's like the Creed, the Nickelback, like the teenagers now are all about it.
Yeah, which is cool for them because they don't.
It wasn't overplayed for them.
Like Jinko jeans are back.
Do y'all remember those?
Google.
Did you wear those?
No. One, I think I was too old.
Okay.
For Jinko. JNCO, I believe is how you spell it. So a lot of people have to Google it. Those are the jeans that were basically like, what is it called? Isosceles triangle or whatever.
Like straight,
like just
big.
straight up triangle pants. And so,
David J saying $200 for Jinkos.
I think they were like $200 back then.
That might be what he said.
Oh, is that what he's saying? Yeah, back then. Yeah. Oh, I bet they're just as crazily expensive now. Which means if Jinko jeans are back, so will those chain wallets, those big ball-bearing chain things that hang down to your knees. Those were really.
Did you ever have one of those?
A chain wallet?
Uh-huh.
I had a real chain wallet.
Oh.
They had a legit chain.
The one to knock off?
No, it wasn't like the big. It was a real chain wallet that cool people wore.
Okay.
You had to wear black Dickie pants, Vans, a band T-shirt, and a chain wallet, and probably a Dickie work shirt with like a social distortion or corrosion conformity patch sewn on it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I wore, and you would have found me really attractive. I was probably wearing a Kango too. Every now and then.
Just seal the deal on that. David J is saying no now. Actually, they're $200 on the website.
Oh, okay. Well.
When I had an Android, I was able to make ringtones from LimeWire songs. Yes?
Yes.
I vividly remember LimeWire.
Movies in 2006.
Okay.
Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Man's Chest. I don't know which one that was, but that was one of them, right?
I gotta do it.
Okay, so I was the only person that never saw the trial, the Johnny Depp trial. So you and I,
I've been going back and showing BC like just 10-minute clips from the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, just for like evening entertainment.
Yeah, and there was a whole reference to a jar of cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. And then for like TV shows,
okay,
the final episodes of that 70s show,
okay,
Malcolm in the Middle, and Arrested Development.
Oh, those were big ones. Those were good ones that all ended right then.
All
okay,
ended, yeah.
Wow. I don't think I don't think I realized they all kind of like lined up like that at the end, like at the same time.
Yeah. I would have thought those were shows in the 90s for some reason. My television's off for the 2000s, the early 2000s.
Everything is. I don't know. I think just everybody. Yeah. All right. Is that it? That's it. 2006.
Yeah, 2006. I think was a pretty. As far as like, pop culture and all that.
Yeah,
like references. Yeah.
Okie dokie. Let's see here. All right, guys, are you ready to do it? If you are new here, first of all, welcome. Very warm welcome. Also, I take notes like I should is what I'm gonna say. I used to say like an old lady, but I mean like on paper. So you'll just hear like crunching and scrunching of paper flipping constantly.
Typewriter clicking.
I do feel like sometimes, there should be like smoke hovering, like in a hazy, like somewhere. Okay, guys, so we're going to talk about Brian Shaffer, and I will be curious to hear y'all's opinion on this one. It's really pretty interesting. I will put up pictures. Actually, I've been bad the past couple weeks. I've been a little slow going on that. I'll get caught up. I had my buddy Beth LaMontagne from the Bar is Open podcast on as my co-host last week, and we did something a little different, a little weird and wild little.
Yeah.
It was a mixture of like cults, what they consider like it was like drug ring, like cartel level ring, cults, if you think on a big level, involving human sacrifice, and a college student from America. And it was a crazy case. So go back and listen to that, if you will. That was the Kilroy case, but that was from last week. But either way, we're going to get started today, and we're going to talk about Brian Shaffer. So Brian was born in February of 1979 in what's called Pickerington, Ohio. So that's near the Columbus area. His mom and dad were Renee and Randy Shaffer, and he had a younger brother named Derek. So Brian was a studious fella. We're going to learn a little bit about his background and what kind of got him to the point he was at in 2006. So he graduated in 2003 from Ohio State University. So there he obtained his bachelor's degree in microbiology. He also had a minor in molecular genetics. So he was driven, I'll say that. His buddies said that he was free-spirited, super smart guy, I would say, as indicated by his major and minor. He was outgoing. He was a prankster. He was very, very close to his mother, and we're going to dive into that a little bit as well. And his mom was a nurse. So story kind of goes that she inspired him to be in the medical field in some kind of capacity. So after graduation, he took some time off. He was working as a radiology tech there at the hospital at Ohio State. But he kind of wanted to get back and get to it. He was getting a little bit older. He wasn't fresh out of school at this point. So in August of 2004 is when he applied for and got into and started the OSU College of Medicine. So he was going to become a doctor. He was pre-med at this point in 2004. So this is also when he met his girlfriend, Alexis. She was a fellow pre-med student as well. So, this is kind of neither here nor there necessarily. There's whispers that Alexis and Brian were very much in love, and that everyone by this time was anticipating anytime there was a gathering or they were going to go on a trip, people anticipated a ring. They thought that they were going to become engaged and he was going to propose at any moment. This is what I would say, if you do listen to a lot of shows, wow, I'm getting in the weeds with it, and this detail doesn't much matter when it comes to the disappearance of Brian. It does matter to the point that when you hear people will hear things and they repeat it, or like I'll hear one podcast that'll say, oh, they were set to probably be engaged. And then you read another thing and it was like, oh, it looks like by all accounts, everyone was anticipating him to propose that next week. And there's no accounts of him. We don't have any receipts of him purchasing a ring. Alexis's father will say that, well, yeah, they were really close, but I'm not sure that Brian was really ready to settle down and get married. So it doesn't matter, but just keep in mind that when you hear something, it doesn't mean it's concrete fact all the time. And that really matters when we're talking about a lot of these unsolveds. But either way, they were in love and they were together and had plans to stay together, regardless of what that looked like. But in 2005, Brian's mom was diagnosed with like a rare, blood cell type cancer, and it was pretty aggressive. And so she actually passed away in 2006. This happened pretty quickly. She was pretty young at the time. I believe she was like 51. So this was an unexpected diagnosis that really worked quickly on her, and she passed away. So as you can imagine, the family was rocked by this, and everyone will say that it sounds like Brian was particularly devastated. As I stated earlier on, he and his mother are very, very close. So all accounts say that Renee's final gift to her son, unbeknownst potentially to any of them that it was the final gift, was actually a trip to Miami for he and Alexis. Spring break week was approaching. We were actually just talking about spring break week on the case last week. Mm-hmm. But spring break week was approaching. He and Alexis were going to go to Miami for the week and just relax and enjoy themselves. And his mom was going to fund the trip. But she passed away in March of 2006. And her family, like I said, was devastated. So there's a lot of, I think a lot of people would agree that Brian was very, very devastated after mom's passing. Okay. So to the point that like he went through kind of some bouts of depression with this. He was having a tough time kind of coming to terms with his mom's death. So he kind of went back and forth with Alexis. So like he said things like, hey, you know, why don't we just run to get way together? Let's just start something new. Let's run off and go somewhere tropical. And he would often say these things. He did have a wanderlust for travel, so it wasn't really wild that he would say something like this. But then he might flip the script a few days later and say something along the lines of, he encouraged her to potentially like just like leave him, maybe find someone else and be happy because he was afraid he couldn't love her the way he needed to in the moment because he was so overcome with grief from the death of his mother. Now, people go back and forth and will speculate that that means that he wanted to leave Alexis or he was trying to push her away. A lot of people will actually say the opposite, that he cared for her very much and he felt guilty that he wasn't providing her with what he knew he should be because of his emotional state at the moment. All of these little things just might come into play with some questions you may have a little bit later as we get into Brian's case. So finals are finally starting to wrap up for him. Spring break is approaching. And so he had plans this one evening. He actually initially was going to go out with his brother, Derek, and I believe Derek's wife. But some things changed, and at the last minute, Derek couldn't hang out. So Brian went to dinner with his father. They went to an Outback. Again, his dad's name is Randy. So they were going to go hang out and kind of celebrate that his finals were over and he could just, you know, kind of take a deep breath. This is not a young child. So remember again, when I say he was 27 at this time. So he wasn't like a young college kid. Brian was 27 years old. So he goes to meet his father. They have a good dinner. But his dad will say later that Brian seemed particularly exhausted to him, like something that was notable to him. He kind of just brushed this aside, though, because, you know, keep in mind, y'all, Brian's in med school. He just wrapped up a week of finals, which, you know, that's daunting. And he's still struggling. His mom just passed away. We're still in like late March now. She just passed away earlier this month. So, you know, I think his father just kind of wrote it off like, yeah, he looks exhausted. He doesn't look great, but also it would make sense as to what's going on in his life right now. So nothing else seemed out of the ordinary as far as his dad was concerned. So after he had dinner with his father, Brian went with his friend, Clint. Okay. So Clint's going to be a key player here. Clint Florence. They were going to go out. So where they lived in these apartments, they were not roommates, but where like Brian's apartment was, it was in Columbus and it was in walking distance, like blocks to this certain location that was like multiple bars and restaurants and things like that. So he would often walk where he was going. So Brian and Clint, headed out to go get some drinks and, you know, just kind of have an evening of it. They were going to actually kind of do like a little bit of a bar crawl, if you will. So we know that at 9:56 that evening, Brian called Alexis. Alexis, his girlfriend at the time, was in Toledo. She was visiting family, and I believe they had like a family pet that was passing away. So she was kind of out doing that, hanging out with her family. So around 10 o'clock that evening, Brian calls her. Okay. So then he and Clint are still out and about doing their things, kind of bar hopping. At some point, we think around midnight, Clint called his friend Meredith to come join them. So she comes and hangs out with them. She actually picks them up and they continue to go bar hopping. They end up at what's called the Ugly Tuna Saloona, and that's there in Columbus. So the Ugly Tuna Saloona, it's a funny name. We do know, and we're gonna expound on this a little bit later, but that Brian and Clint had an argument earlier that night. We don't know why. Like to this day, we really don't know why, but it's something that is important to note. So around 2 a.m., Clint and Meredith will say that they realized they hadn't seen Brian for a while and they kind of start to look for him. The bar is a 2-story bar. There are restrooms inside that Clint went to look for Brian in. They can't find him anywhere. They tried to call him. He's not answering. Eventually, they think that he's just probably chosen to walk home. The apartment, like I said, was only about 6 blocks away, and so they left without him. So that night, we have video footage. That bar has footage in a lot of areas. In fact, I believe the statistics from that time were that Columbus, particularly this downtown area, had more camera footage there than in like Toledo, whatever, like 3 other cities combined. So when people start to look for Brian, everybody is actually a little, I think that there's a lot of hope there because they know there's a lot of eyes, if you will, digital, that is, on all of the streets and exits and these kinds of things. So I think they were a bit hopeful. But we have footage of them all going in the bar. That video exists from the restaurant, the bar. We have footage of Brian walking out. Then you see him talking outside. This is like 1:30ish or so, something like that, to 2 girls. Their names are Brighton and Amber, these young women. They've since come forward and talked about their account of the evening. And then they kind of come off camera for a moment, and then you see Brian walking back inside, and then that's it. So the very last video footage of Brian is him walking back inside the Ugly Tuna. Okay. And this is like around 1:36, I believe, something like that in the morning. So we'll leave that a little vague for now and come back to the details on that in a moment. So the following morning, Meredith takes Clint and takes him back to pick his car up from the parking lot of Brian's apartment building because he had driven over there when they went out the night prior. Some people get hung up on the fact that neither Meredith nor Clint like checked up on Brian when she dropped Clint back off at his car. And I don't think really anything of that, because if they'd had a late night and they'd been drinking all night and got in at whatever time in the morning, and they've got to do that morning thing where she drops Clint back off, he's exhausted, and he's just kind of pouring out of her car probably and pouring right back into his to leave. I don't see anything wrong with the fact that they didn't check on Brian. Especially if there had been a bit of a fight or they were on the outs a little bit. Like, they're grown, like they're not too worried about it. So now we have Alexis, though. His girlfriend has been calling. So the next day rolls around. She's calling. She's not getting him. Randy, his father, had tried to get in touch with him at some point and couldn't. So this day is going on and on. So on that Sunday, I believe, Alexis goes to Brian's apartment to check on him. His car is there, right where he always parks. His apartment is normal. The bed looks like it has not been slept in. There is no disarray. There's no kind of a struggle or a broken window or anything like this. And this actually causes her a lot more concern. And you've got to think a lot of sources word it like, she was immediately worried. Well, I mean, maybe, or she could have just thought he was cheating on her. Like that he'd been gone for the night. You know what I mean? I'm not sure that she was probably immediately worried, but we can't say she immediately thought he met with foul play. Yeah. He just didn't come home from a bar as far as she knows. So, so she goes, and when she realizes that he seemingly has not been back home, she contacts his dad and his brother, and then they all 3 start like trying to phone him, call his acquaintances, and just try to pinpoint where he might be. Well, Monday morning's about to roll around, right? And Monday is the day that they were going to be leaving Brian and Alexis to go on this big spring break trip for the week to Miami. So Alexis, I just keep putting myself in her brain because I keep reading about this. And so Alexis actually goes there to the airport to wait for Brian, thinking that whatever, but that he'll be back and they will fly off together and continue on this trip. So when he called her on Saturday night from the bar at 10 p.m., he confirmed their plans for Monday. I guess they talked. It was probably one of those, can't wait for Monday, see you then, or whatever, have fun with your family, love you, bye, whatever. So she goes on Monday, and I just wonder if she was sitting there like, I mean, none of this matters. It's just speculative. But I mean, I just wonder, is she sitting there with her heart broken thinking he's choosing not to go with her, be with her, or something like that, like not understanding that it's something different entirely. Because I don't know why you like.
Yeah, and you also got to get into, not you, but I mean the history, if they have a history like that of any kind of wavering or I hinted that he should, get me a ring or whatever, and he didn't buy, whatever it is, like if there were any kind of tales that maybe he was not going to go that path.
I just think that if she took the time to go and sit, I don't know, like without hide nor hair, like had heard nothing from him, and he was just supposed to roll up in the airport and they're gonna be good to go. Like after he left to go to a bar on Saturday night.
And that's one of those too where if somebody goes, oh, well, what happens if you lose your phone back then? Is that in 06? I don't know if you'd have fine whatever.
Probably not find my phone, but like he's a grown man. And it's been 48 hours since he left to go to the bar. Like, by now he could go anywhere and call her. Like,
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So I guess
the only reason I giggled, I thought about like I've left my brother places before, and he's always kind of made it back.
Yeah.
Home, you know what I mean? So it's no, and that's not even using cell phones or anything.
Right.
So maybe it was
just because he's like a hound dog.
Yeah, he's a wild man.
Yeah, and I know none of that, that's getting in the weeds of it. None of that has anything really to do with his disappearance, other than the fact that I think about that often when I read about this, what might have been going through her head in the moment. All right. So now we've got a missing persons report. Okay. So by that Monday, she goes to the airport, their flight goes on and leaves. She goes back home, and now it's serious. Okay. So now we're calling in. So she calls local police, or his family does. They make the report. They file the missing persons report. So immediately, I will say we've done a few shows lately where I feel bad because it's been kind of a trend lately where we're talking about potential mishandling of investigations or lackluster, detective work or whatever. This is the opposite. So they scour. They immediately go to the Ugly Tuna, any local hospitals, the shelters, dumpsters, landfills, all the bins, all the sewage network and the, under the roadways and all these kinds of things to locate Brian, or find any kind of clue, or find his wallet, or find his phone. Nothing. Yeah. They find nothing, not a drop, not anything at all. And they searched a pretty wide radius, if I'm not mistaken, of every one of the dumpsters, these kinds of things, and the landfills. BC, do you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like when, to obtain a search warrant, or to go, we say that a lot. They search the landfills, and it's not as easy as there's like, well, let's just drive to the landfill and look for a body. Yeah. Have you ever seen a landfill? Because that's not possible. So what does that look like to do?
Yes, it's crazy, but you can, most landfills anyway, you can contact them as a law enforcement agency. Explain to them what you've got, that you're looking for a missing person, that sort of thing. And then let them know this is the last known location. Potentially, if he had fallen in a dumpster or was murdered and dumped in a dumpster, when would the pickup dates be? And usually landfills can tell you, oh, well, that location would be in this grid, so E7 or whatever.
So I was going to say that you've told me. I didn't know that. But, I mean, I figured there had to be some kind of a search system. But so I guess there's like a grid work, generally speaking, or something, and they may all do it a little differently. But something like that. Like if you think of well, actually, it's great because you can't see anything, so it makes sense. Think of underwater divers like doing like water recoveries and things. They also make grids because they're working in dark water, so they're visibly, just rendered useless. But same idea. So you search a grid pattern, so certain dumpsters may be located in, or their output in certain grids. But
so it's not like you're going to walk the landfill just aimlessly.
It's impossible.
Yes, exactly. Nobody ever really talks.
Do you have to get any kind of and you may have touched on this, I'm sorry. Did you like either a search or a permit or anything like that? You can just go and
because it's all considered abandoned property.
Well, that's true because it's trash. Yeah, that'd be like
so
curbside stuff.
If a dumpster's on private property,
you wait.
That can get a little,
but you wait till it gets dumped.
Well, it just depends. Like if the business says, "Hey, that's our dumpster. We throw our trash in there. We don't move the dumpster." Truck pulls up, and then it's considered abandoned. The way if your trash can, you put trash in your trash can, and it stays on the curtilage on your property. On your trash day, when you take it to the curb, then it becomes abandoned, and police can pull up and snatch it. But before that, if it's on your property, you got to get a search warrant. So, but when businesses say like that dumpster, when we throw that our trash in that dumpster, it's abandoned, that's considered like abandoned property as trash, and they don't have to move their dumpster to a curbside on Tuesday
Gotcha.
or whatever.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Once it leaves their physical being,
Yes.
like their person. Gotcha.
And if you're looking for usually like that, like if you're looking for a missing person, and you're checking dumpsters, you're gonna see immediately something probably that. Then if you had to slow down and go, okay, now we sadly, like if we have a limb of an arm, or a limb of the body, now we're going to slow down, get a search warrant, only because we're going to end up processing and doing
all
things
kinds
like
of things.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Well, so they did just that. They did everything they could. They searched all the dumpsters, landfills, like I said, sewer systems, all the stuff. So, here it is. Actually, it says that Columbus has more security cameras than any other city in Ohio, more than Cleveland, Toledo, and Cincinnati. That's what it was. I knew it was like three big ones. So they really were hopeful that something would show the path that Brian took after this. So we have the last footage of him that we know of, and I'll put this on Instagram, is when he's just outside that Ugly Tuna right before 2:00 in the morning. That morning, it'd be April 1st. And he was talking to those two women, Brighton and Amber, that I mentioned earlier. But again, he was never seen again leaving. We see him talking to them and walking in and never leaving. So that's why I think I titled it on YouTube this way, but you'll hear people say, like, a man walks into a bar, right? Like a bad joke, but like he doesn't walk back out. We'll talk about our theories on this, but that's kind of the, the general appearance here. So we don't have any activity on his credit cards, his debit cards, his bank account, or anything like this. And that's all we really have. So in terms of the what, that's what we've got. Like everything that I've said to you is what we've got. We do have some details we're going to talk about that might start shifting perspective, though, when it gets into we got some finance stuff, some relational stuff, some other things that might start changing your direction. What do you immediately just start thinking? Do you have any initial thoughts right now?
Well, when people say he walks in a bar and he never comes out, and you're dealing with digital video, that's, sorry, I don't want to get ahead.
Go for it.
But that's one of those things that I never want to hear. Well, I don't want to say I never want to hear, but if you tell me 100% this person walked in, there's no way they walked out, all because of the video, then I'm going to have to understand every second of that video is running. There's no glitches, or this person didn't go in and then walk out of a different exit, and you're like, oh, no, we know that camera's working or not working.
Yeah. Well, and that's precisely what happened. So they actually had multiple cameras there at the Big Tuna, okay? There were also employee exits toward the back that were not monitored by video surveillance. So a lot of people they're just in this concrete way of thinking that, well, if he walked in the public entrance where there are videos, that's where he walked out. He could have walked out anywhere. Yeah. He could have easily walked out of one of those other doors. He might have tried to hit the skids on Clint and was like, forget this noise. Like, I don't even, a good old Irish goodbye. You know what I mean? Like, I'm leaving and I'm not saying bye to anybody and I'm heading out the back. So just try not to get so boxed into these thoughts that, it has to be this public door that he went back out of. We also know that one of the videos shows where you can see where it was manually overridden. So I don't know when you looked into this a little bit if you saw that or not, but there's one that shows, I believe it's the one that shows the top like elevator footage. And you see him in there with a couple girls. You see it looks like it was manually overridden and it looks like whoever's monitoring it was just checking out the ladies. So looking at some girls, whatever. And then it kind of eventually goes back to where it's like manned post that it was supposed to be at. So you've got those things too. I just think that, as we talk about these kinds of things a lot, you can't hang your hat on technology can be so great. And we talk about why advances in it make such a difference in solving cases, but you can't hang your hat on it all the time. Or working in the hospital, you can't look at a monitor all the time, right? You got to look at your person. You can't just stare at it because sometimes what it says up here isn't going to be the same as what's really happening to them. And same here with this camera. So the cameras are interesting. And we'll talk about what the investigators did to kind of comb through that footage and what that looked like. So Sergeant Hurst, that's who, John Hurst is who was on the case. He has since retired, by the way, y'all. We'll talk about that. But he got so consumed with this, it drove him to the point of distraction that he would be doing maybe extra duty stuff or something, be somewhere else, be off and see someone that looks, resembles Brian and make a beeline to the guy. It just was kind of always in his head. So he said that there's one account where someone says he could have gone out this one exit, and then Sergeant Hurst says, well, an employee was manning that exit and says that there's no way, no how, no one came out this door. To me, there's a lot of moving parts. It's also a loud, noisy bar, and there's people drinking, and I just think it's pretty easy, especially when you're thinking of the area. Think of a downtown Columbus area with multiple bars stacked and in rows and people on the streets. This is a heavily populated area, and I think that would be easy to say that somebody could, in fact, slip away. So this would be one of the other theories. It's essentially, the rest of the show is the theory portion, because there are a lot more theories than there is details to the initial part of the case. This is one, if you are someone who enjoys a Reddit rabbit hole, be careful. I will always warn you, be careful there, because it's not always, you got a lot of hearsay, but this one is one for the books with the Reddit rabbit holes, because everybody's got a theory. I did read a good source, though, where John Hurst was interviewed, the lead detective on the case, and they kind of brought a lot of these theories by him, just to kind of get his, thoughts on them, or to prove or disprove them. You guys, this is still open. So it's not really, it's hard to say cold case when it was missing persons, but it wasn't solved. It's not really looked at as murder necessarily. So they're working it like it's not necessarily good. But there are plenty of people, even on that side of the law enforcement world, that think he could just be alive and not around. So it's not technically an investigation like that, but trust me, it's still being worked. They're still looking at witnesses. But that's why I say these theory portions. So he's a little tight-lipped in a good way. He'll answer questions confidently and to satisfy you, but he leaves it at that.
Yeah, that's good.
So no, it's exactly what he should be doing.
Yeah.
So one of the theories is that potentially, if he went out one of these back doors, there was a construction site out back of the Big Tuna, or the Ugly Tuna. I keep saying Big Tuna because I'm thinking of The Office. If you guys watch The Office, you'll know. But the Ugly Tuna. So there was a construction site out back. And when I say construction site, I mean a working construction site. They were building a new building out back. So there were holes. There was rebar. There, was places for concrete to be poured and all of these kinds of things. So this has been a lot of people's thoughts, is that he walks out this back door, which people will say that once investigators looked at it later, if you're completely of sound mind and sober and it's broad daylight, you still very easily could get tripped up back there and have a tough time, or fall into something, or, twist an ankle, or you name it. So if it's nighttime, it's 2 a.m., Brian's been bar hopping all night. They say that the accounts of the two women he was speaking to outside, she said, for instance, the one named Brighton said that she can't say for sure that he was drunk, but she said he was having a great time, essentially feeling no pain. So I think he was probably getting there. So he leaves, and some people think that he comes out that exit door, that back, employee exit door, and stumbles upon something in the construction site, falls into a hole. So people think he might have fallen into a kind of a deep hole, hit his head, maybe got, knocked out or whatever. And then next day rolls around, construction crews come out, and, concrete's poured on him, or dirt is mounted on top of him, unbeknownst to the operators of the machinery. You could make that work, but it's far-fetched, because if you have ever been near a construction site, you've got foremen, you've got your safety guys, you've got, they're not just blindly filling in holes with concrete and blindly throwing dirt into spots, so it would be a lot for a grown man to be in a hole and, unknowingly covered up.
Yeah. And I would assume, when was it filed again? On Sunday? The missing person report?
Monday. So it was a work day. Yeah, no, I thought the same thing. So it would have been a weekday.
Okay, so the construction did not start back until probably Monday then, so you're still good. Right. Yeah, so I'm sure they checked that location, because that'd be the first thing most people would think. Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
They checked that location. They actually searched it even with cadaver dogs in tow.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing was found. I do think it's interesting that it does make me feel like maybe they had been pouring concrete or filling holes with dirt if they brought the dogs to the site. Not necessarily, but I mean, if they think that maybe he's somewhere they can't visibly see him, in case that on the off chance that that's the case. So that was the kind of the theory of the construction site and the back exit. Some people have said that they think he, might have taken his own life. His friends and family will say they did not notice depression in him, aside from his mother's passing, of course. But generally speaking, they didn't notice depressive episodes. But there are other sources that say he had been on and off Prozac over the years with some, he was fine, but he had some episodes. So one of the theories is that he took his own life. I'm kind of just debunking that right off the rip, only because as you hear more and more about this, again, this was 2006. So actually this past March, like a month ago, we just hit, or April 1st, we just hit the 18-year mark that Brian has been missing. Not seen, heard of in 18 years. And I just feel like with suicide, in your experience, would you say across the board, generally speaking, people, I would think, want to be found?
When they commit suicide?
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe usually. Not necessarily, but I can't say all the time, but between that and the fact that he's not been found, even if he didn't want to be found and committed suicide, you would think that 18 years later, somebody would have found something.
Yes. I can think of one off the top of my head I won't speak on, but where a person did not want to be found. But other than that, usually people want to be found. And that's kind of not really in their plan for the most part. It's just ending the life. Now, they may make some precautions so their family members don't find
certain things.
But and plus it's 2:00 in the morning. He's out socializing.
It doesn't make
drinking.
Sense.
Something like that, I would assume would happen with him at home more at 2:00 in the morning, drinking all night. Not spur of the moment. All of a sudden, now I'm just going to commit suicide.
Right. It doesn't really, like, the psychology doesn't match up there at all. And even, like I said, even if that's exactly what happened, we don't have any footage of him. So you got to think, forget the footage there at the bar. There's also multiple cameras all up and down those streets. And there's no footage of him on foot or in a car, on the street there. So he would have had to get somewhere and then also be able to do it in a way that he's not ever found ever. And I just feel like that's just much more unlikely. So out of all the theories, that one definitely is not high up on my list. Now, there is a thought that he could have been abducted somehow, like that he gets out. And I don't mean like he's got a bag thrown over his head and he's kidnapped, but he could try to hitch a ride from somebody. He could hop in a car somewhere. Hey, man, take me wherever. And they're like, yeah, all right. Like, this guy's probably got some money on him. You know what I mean? So anything like that. And then that would account for, or even if it wasn't necessarily initially malicious, him hopping in a car right outside of that bar would account for a lot. That would explain why we don't have his footage of him walking up and down those streets or going back toward his apartment complex or anything like that.
Yeah.
They will say this can be subjective. I did not look at crime rates, but all the sources I've read said that this was a fairly higher crime area at that time. This bar is now closed down, but where these line of bars and restaurants were evidently was a little bit just not super safe. So when he's going outside, another thought is for some people with the construction site is not that he necessarily walked out and fell and hurt himself, but he walked out and maybe some bad doings were going on. Like maybe he stumbled upon something, or maybe he saw some people, maybe he wanted to get in on something that some people were doing, but found himself with the wrong people. But there again, now you have people who have to be able to get rid of him somehow. So that's tough. I mean, kind of everything comes back around to, but even if he were killed there, somebody's got to get rid of that.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
That's difficult. Evidently, with these dogs that they used, his scent was traced to a Wendy's parking lot down the street and ends there. Now, this gets a little messy because the dogs cannot be necessarily an exact science. We've talked on that a lot. So was it that his scent was tracked or not? And then if it was, is that what happened? Did he want to go grab a 2 a.m. burger after drinking all night? And that's where he hops in the car with somebody or something happens like that. So they don't speak too highly on that or too much about that Wendy's parking lot. But we do know that that's kind of where, if we're going with the dogs, they potentially tracked his scent there.
But I'm assuming Wendy's video and no debit card use.
We don't have any of that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Precisely. Like at every turn, there's no more footage.
Gotcha.
Like I said, the very last footage we have of him is going back in that bar. But so there's the new life theory. So a lot of people think that he just left and started an entirely new existence. The people who believe this will say likely somewhere tropical, like not there in Ohio, somewhere on an island somewhere. So do you remember the time that I said he took a little break from school when he was in college before he came back to be pre-med? He actually had gone to Puerto Rico, and a lot of accounts make it look like he'd just gone on a trip to Puerto Rico. Well, he was there, depending on who you talk to, between like 6 and 12 months.
Oh.
So he like spent time there.
Yeah.
So it is important to know that. I think it's important to talk on that. I've not often been in the new life camp on this story, but finding out that detail kind of may shift my thoughts a little bit. It at least opens up some doors a little bit more so than I thought. He played guitar. He always said that he was in a band and he wanted to like start a band. Like he wanted to do that, I think, more professionally than be a doctor. And so he would say that essentially being a doctor was just a means to get a band going at some point. And like, that's what he really wanted to do. He wanted to, it was like Jimmy, like this per him, like a Buffett type lifestyle. That's all he really wanted to do. So he always would talk about going away, joke with Alexis about running away and living somewhere else. And then we know that he did actually spend that time in Puerto Rico. So.
Yeah. Anytime you're looking at someone's behavior, their previous behavior can predict future behavior. So when you're doing missing persons, that's one of the things you ask about is like, hey, have they ever done this before? Have they ever just disappeared? Have they ever? And then sometimes you find out, well, yeah, a couple years ago he got stressed and he just kind of checked out, or she just checked out for a little bit. But I mean, it was only for like 3 or 4 days. And you think 3 or 4 days is a lot of time. It was still a decision
they made, something
they chose to do. Made to escape whatever was going on, or to eventually,
that was their go-to.
So if the 6 to 12 months was similar to that, I mean, yeah, you do have to take that into consideration. Because your stressor, I don't mean to take over real quick, but the stressor would be if he's flying out Monday, if there is pressure about this marriage, and I'm not disrespecting, I'm just saying, if there's pressure going on about a marriage, pressure about school, maybe like, hey, why am I doing all this when really I want to live like this? I think Sebastian Younger, the writer, talks about in one of his books, like just going, from state to state. Yeah. Just a backpack on his back, panhandling, or not panhandling, but just living city to city, like a homeless person, and talks about the lack of responsibility and how rewarding it was. And then when he came back to society, when he would start stressing out, he would talk about, there are times when I get that urge to just
like that felt better.
Flee. Yeah. So, I mean, if he's already had a taste of that, it could be these stressors building up.
So when his girlfriend was, I say interviewed, but one of the times a quote that she said, Alexis said, she said, quote, I don't think he's alive. I can't imagine he would have just done that. When she was asked whether or not she thought he would do something along those lines. Detectives interview over 100 people. Like I said before, including the 2 women that he spoke with there at the bar. Nothing seemed super significant at that point. We're going to talk on Clint in a moment, because I would say that out of all the theories, Clint is probably 65 to 75% of most people's theory. But some months go by. Every night, Alexis, his girlfriend, calls his phone. We do kind of funny things sometimes when a loved one either passes away, or in this case, unfortunately, just vanishes. So she calls his phone every night, and then it becomes just by habit, not because she actually even expects him to answer or anyone else to. So 6 months go by, and then all of a sudden, she gets a ring. So his phone rings. Mm-hmm. She immediately freaks out, calls the Columbus Police Department, calls Brian's father. They all start calling. So the police department, his father, Alexis continue to call his phone. No one ever answers it, but they're able to triangulate the tower, right? So at that time, GPS capabilities on phones were much different than they are now. That's, we can't, when we talk about locating a phone now, I mean, you can see where you are on your own phone, beside a parking lot, beside a whatever. So then it wasn't quite that way, but it would maybe potentially even give you almost like a 20 mile is what the sergeant on the case said, range. And that's when you hear about like triangulation of cell phone towers, that's what they're saying, like as if there's a tower this far out and one this far out, and it might have pinged on this one, then they can kind of make a bit of a grid or a location there. So it actually indicated a location around 14 miles or so from where he was last seen. So not as incredibly accurate as it would be these days, but that was a bizarre development in the case. You good?
Yeah. I sneeze.
Do you need to sneeze? Mm-mm. You guys get your drinks. So the cell phone thing was interesting. Not much has come of that because it never rang again. Mm-hmm. Nothing ever came of that after that. So they did call the cell phone carrier. They tried to kind of figure out what would make it ring at that point when it had not yet. Had it been, some people will say that the killer decided for whatever reason that night to turn on the phone, and that caused it to ring when Alexis called, or, whoever had the phone decided that night to turn it on. At some point, the cell phone carrier actually just said that, that could be a glitch in the system. But then other people have debunked that have worked IT and phones and things like that. And they're like, that's not, if multiple people called it and it rang, that's not what we would consider a glitch in the system. Like that phone had to have at least been on, XYZ. A few things were different than had been prior. But again, nothing, kind of like everything else, nothing really came out of that. So we are going to talk about Clint, because that's what's on everybody's mind, I think, the more you read about this case. So Clint had an interesting relationship with Brian in the sense that nobody talks super positively of it. Like I said before, they had gotten into an argument even that night, that last night that Brian was seen at the Ugly Tuna. They had kind of just like a tumultuous friendship. They just weren't the best of friends. So when people talk about Clint, I think he was kind of like the guy, if nobody else could hang out, it sounds like, that's who Brian's calling. And it kind of sounds like that's what happened this night. So people have a tough time with Clint because while all of Brian's friends immediately upon his disappearance spoke with police, answered everything, did all this stuff, they all took polygraphs. The police wanted every single one of them, all of his friends, particularly the last people he was with. They weren't implicating any one of them. They just said, let's just across the board go on and knock this stuff out with the people that we know he knows. They all did, except Clint. So Clint pretty quickly lawyered up, and upon to his counsel's advice, declined the polygraph. Which, you know what I say about that.
Yeah. What do you say? What do you usually say?
I say decline the polygraph. I always say decline because it scares me because I know what they are. I know why they can't be used in court. I know it's a whole pattern. I understand it's just a tool. And I jokingly say that. But I say it because I get in my head so much thinking, did they mean this bite? Did they mean that? Am I answering it wrong? And that's why I jokingly say that. But Clint did deny it. And that put kind of a beacon on him for a lot of people, thinking that he has to be at fault because of this. That's not necessarily true. And it's to what we talked about the other day, right? What would be some reasons you would think that he would decline it if he were perfectly innocent?
Yeah. I'm not saying he's involved in this, but people in the past have lied about drugs or drug use or been deceitful necessarily about their statements because they're trying to hide the drug stuff. They got nothing to do with it.
He doesn't want his girlfriend to know he was talking to other women that night.
Exactly. Or potentially, if he and Brian have something else going on that initially he may have thought, well, I'm not going to say anything because if Brian shows back up, this is not going to be good for him. You know what I mean? Like if...
We'll chat on it.
Okay. Well, you know what? We do think a lot. We haven't even talked about this.
No, we haven't talked about that.
I think we're probably thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
In that sense, yeah.
Yeah. So, and also, like you said, like he and his attorney could have gotten to talk about, I don't even necessarily think it's crazy he got an attorney. If he wasn't in the best graces with Brian and he's the last person to see him, you know, his family could have been like, that just puts you in a precarious spot, you know, even if everything's on the up and up. So that is what happens. He gets the attorney, he lawyers up, he does not take the polygraph. So Derek, this is Brian's younger brother, if you remember, said about Clint, he said, quote, as soon as the detectives started getting involved, that's when he pretty much had no contact with anyone. I've always thought he definitely knows something and he just won't come forward with it. If Brian did take off somewhere, if that is the case, we just always had a strong feeling that Clint would possibly know this. I disagree. I'm not in their family, but it doesn't sound like Brian and Clint, at least at that time, had the kind of relationship where if Brian was going to do this super secret thing and leave the world as he knew it and go start a whole new life, that Clint's the one he's divulging this to. And if he's starting a super secret new life separately from Clint, real quick, I'm going to go down this little hole. He's going to do it at 2:00 in the morning, drunk, and do it well.
Yeah.
Like
none of that to me makes sense.
Right. And we know that prior to going out that evening, he had actually talked with a couple of friends who were later interviewed. And they all corroborated the same thing independently, that he had plans to have essentially an after party at his house after he got back from the bar that night. He was going to have people over at midnight or 1. Yeah, Brian.
Okay.
Right. So he had plans that night to continue to kind of party and hang. I think he was just ready. He was glad finals were over. So I guess it was going to be an all-nighter. So he had plans. And in fact, his words to his buddies who were going to come over was basically, I'll let you know when I leave there or when I get back home and you guys come on over. And nobody heard back from him.
Yeah.
So nobody came over. And so that's another thing that doesn't indicate suicide. That doesn't indicate new life. I mean, unless he's trying to cover his steps trifold, maybe, but you know what I mean?
You would almost minimize that. If you're going to fall off the grid, you just go off the grid. You don't, because now your window of getting away, you know what I mean? To actually get out of the city and do whatever, you just shorten it to about 15 minutes to an hour, whatever. If you're telling everybody, hey, come over, I'll hit you up later. But really, I'm going to fall off the grid.
And what if they do come over, whether you call them or not,
Right. And I'm going to I'm not saying he's drunk, but it sounds like they were drinking quite a bit. So maybe he was drunk by then. You're going to then go off the grid drunk. You know what I mean? Like that. I don't know. I would imagine that if you're in med school and this and that, he may be a little bit of a planner. So if he was going to do that, you wouldn't think you would do it.
Not spontaneously or not that's just an odd, it just doesn't make any sense. Okay. So All this is unanswered. We know that. So unfortunately, in 2008, 2 years later, a big storm comes through that area, and Brian's father, Randy, is hit by a tree limb and succumbs to his injuries. So Randy passes away from an actual freak accident just 2 years after Brian's disappearance. So just everyone keep in mind Derek, the little brother, because in almost exactly 2 years' time, he's lost his mother, his older brother, and then his father. This is terrible.
Yeah.
So the family hires a private investigator named Don Corbett. Okay. So he found, when he started looking into stuff, an interesting little message. So you know how you can do the online obituaries, or the funeral home will often have an area for someone to leave a message or give a memory of a loved one. And there was one that's, the comment said, "Dad, I love you. Love, comma, Brian." And then in parentheses it says U.S. Virgin Islands. Well, that's not funny, but I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous. We learned it was a hoax, and we'll tell about how we know that. But whoever did that, like, why put U.S. Virgin Islands, or why put Brian, or why put, like, if you're really trying to trick somebody, that's kind of, either way. The police department subpoenaed that web host records and traced the the geographic origin of who commented that. Evidently, the post was written on a public computer that was in Franklin County, and no clues or anything have come from that. I would be interested in camera footage from wherever that computer was located, though. Not because I think it's Brian, but just to see who's writing it and see who they are and what they know and why they're writing that. And it
would be really nice to go to that person and be like, "Hey, dumb person,
what were you gonna say?"
Stop. But to go right to them and be like, "Look what you did now," and sit there for like an hour and explain to them what the younger brother's gone through, and the death of the mother, and his brother's missing, and it's, you know what I mean, like,
and the time and energy wasted.
Really make someone feel bad for doing that. That made me mad.
No, I agree. So, so that PI evidently is trying to find more and more evidence. He was having a tough time obtaining it from the police, but that's okay. And we talk about it all the time. If this is ongoing, there's a reason not everybody, even this private investigator, cannot obtain those materials. So then there's a Tijuana sighting. So there's a picture of a homeless. Did you see the homeless man? I'll put it on Instagram.
I did not see the picture.
So that's the picture of a man that they say, which he resembles him. I mean, I'll give him that. Brian Shaffer. In 2020, this cropped up. So he was in Tijuana, Mexico. Evidently, people thought that he bore quite a resemblance to Brian Shaffer. He looked like the pictures of Brian that I'll show tomorrow, but with a beard. I'll put it on Instagram. They did have FBI's facial recognition team get on it, and a few weeks later determined that they did not believe it was Brian. There are no more leads whatsoever in that sense.
At first glance, that looked like Joe Biden's kid, or son.
Oh, Hunter Biden. It does actually look like Hunter Biden.
Yeah, I say kid. That's a grown ass man.
That is a grown man.
Yeah,
actually, you're right.
Yeah.
So they did just last year in 2023. The Ohio Attorney General Bureau of Criminal Investigation got together with the Columbus Police Department, and they had an age progressed image of Brian Shaffer. It's kind of the first time they've done one of those in quite a while. It was from a pretty renowned artist. So they're just trying to get eyes on it again, get people out there to try to, if they know anything. So we're going to start to wrap it up. But before we do, let's just kind of hone in on the last 2 or 3 little things that might make a difference in your opinion on what may or may not have happened to Brian Shaffer. So Brian was not in much debt with college. Now, you've got to think he had an undergrad, and then he was going into med school. So he had quite a bit of schooling under his belt, but not a lot of debt. And the reason for this is his mom had essentially been carrying him. So she was pretty responsible financially for his education, and a lot of things like this. We learned that Dad may have been resenting this, Randy. So evidently there had been a falling out prior with Randy and his two sons, I think particularly with Brian, because Randy was not happy with the amount of like the portion of money that they were set to receive from their mother's passing.
Okay.
I mean, she wrote it out. It was her choice, but I guess she had the boys set up to receive more money than the quote is that he thought that they deserved in it.
Okay.
So Brian and his father had recently had a falling out about this. This is pretty just on the heels of her death that Brian goes missing. So meaning emotions are high. So they did have that dinner that night, but it was kind of on the heels of them having a bit of a disagreement. His dad did seem to be fairly unhappy about this. And it sounds like his mom, like I said, was mainly paying for his college education. And all accounts kind of point to the fact that Randy had plans to cut Brian off financially at this point, like now that his mom died. So, we know money is a motivator. So I'm not saying that means that Randy did something to his son, but just as something to keep in mind that there were some tensions there financially with Randy and his son. And Brian was 27 years old.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that they were unfounded. I mean, he's going to take time off, go to Puerto Rico, come back, decide to go to med school, all this and that. But then mom's still paying for all this stuff. Dad may start to be like, okay, like, you're a big boy. And I can't say I don't want to put words in their mouth, but what I did say prior to that seems to be kindly widely accounted for. Also, there are speculations. So when the lead on the case was asked about this, he will say, I can't speak on it too much. There were speculations, and he was like, I can't corroborate that one way or another. But that Brian had struggled with his sexuality. He potentially had maybe ventured into a relationship with a man at some point. I think there is a thought that Clint was the man, and that this could point to a lot of their disagreement, their hostility. We also learned that there was a time when Clint and Brian were roommates, and they had such an argument that it caused them to decide to live separately. Yet they continued to hang out. So when they hung out prior to the Ugly Tuna incident, they had been walking down the street prior to that another night. And the account kind of gets a little shady, like someone from another group, think like college kids, like all walking one way, all walking another way. Someone kind of shouts out something. Brian gets punched for it. Where it gets messy is we don't know if it's because of something that like if somebody from another group said something and Clint spouted off and Brian takes the punch for it, or if the two of them were getting in a disagreement. Either way, they'd gotten in an argument. We know they got another argument the night that Brian went missing. And I don't know if that could account for some of their hostility there. Some people will say that they think that maybe Brian was flirting with those girls, and that ultimately angered Clint. If he was jealous, if in fact he is the man that was in the relationship, it kind of seems to be that that's what people are thinking. But and then initially speaking, Meredith, that's the woman who picked them up and took them to this bar. It seemed to be a really like, we went here at this time, went here at this time. Basically, we were all together. The next thing you know, Brian says he's going to go talk to the band or something. He doesn't come back. We can't find him. We hang out for a while, and then we leave. We look for him for a minute, and then we leave. Well, I think Clint was actually like looking for him for more than just a couple of minutes. She looked for him, came back to the table, and Clint was kind of gone for a while. And then comes back and says, I checked all the restrooms. I checked, and I couldn't find him. Maybe that's exactly what he did. I don't know. But I think that later account shows that Meredith actually was outside of Clint's line of sight, or he was out of hers for longer than what was originally kind of to be. So, I don't know. I do know that the lead that I talked to you about has retired, and now Detective Blanche Tucker is the woman who's taken over the process of this case, and she started re-interviewing witnesses, anybody connected to Brian. So she's still working it. She's still working the case. She says that she believes someone involved with his disappearance initially withheld information the first go round, likely somebody who was already interviewed previously. Crime Stoppers of Central Ohio still has a $100,000 reward for any information that solves this or can lead to solve it. And you can leave any tips anonymously. So please do, if you want to call 614-461-TIPS, TIPS, and I'll put that on Instagram as well. I do want to note that there was a body of water. Are you getting there?
You know me. Yeah.
There was a body of water.
Drew a map out and everything.
Did you now? Well, we may have to explore that. So Randy, before his passing, Brian's father, did talk to a psychic at one point. Neither here nor there how you feel about that, but he did, and that psychic did state that Brian's body would be found in a body of water. So Randy and his son Derek and some other people went to this place and searched along the banks and the shores of the Olentangy River that goes through Columbus, and it is adjacent to that OSU campus where Brian went to school. It's about a mile from his apartment. Okay. But there were no traces of him to be found. So here's my question for you. And I know we talk about water often, about where people think something terrible happened. That is terrible, but where they think it's foul play or think whatever. And when it can be as sad and tragic as simple as somebody is drunk and trip and fall and drown. And that is that. And maybe they're get snagged on a branch or something and don't resurface, anything like that. And sometimes, unfortunately, it is really just that simple. The case, though, of Riley Strain out of Nashville, if you guys have been watching the news at all in the past couple of months, he was a college boy down in Nashville, kind of partying up with some of his frat bro friends. They were at a pretty famous bar there. He takes off walking. The difference is we have video footage of him, though. We have him at different points of location in Nashville, down the street. We even have body cam footage from a police officer who saw him and spoke to him and, asked him how he was doing that night, and he walks by. So we can actually trace his movements. And unfortunately and sadly, a couple of weeks later, Riley's body was found washed up on a bank just off of the Cumberland River. I say all of that because him being found like that almost makes it, for me, less likely that that's what happened to Brian, because now it's been 18 years, almost exactly 18 years. And in that amount of time, we wouldn't have found a wallet, a phone. Okay. Maybe some of that stuff sunk, but some clothing article. Yeah. Okay. Something. Don't you? Yeah. I mean, in this amount of time.
Yeah. I started pulling the maps.
I'll fix it.
Yeah. But I started looking at the maps because when we talked about the construction site, and if you leave walking on foot, and I'm assuming that's a normal behavior for him since they didn't act too nervous about it. And I believe he lived six blocks away, right? Yeah. And I don't know. I can't remember which direction he goes in. Either way, he could even be walking, whatever. There is a river there, like we talked about. And I do often look at things like this because my background, a lot of times, that's what would happen. You're looking, if someone doesn't voluntarily check out of their life, in other words, they don't go missing for a couple of days because of drug use or an affair, or whatever they got going on, and something natural happens to them in that sense. They fall in a river, or fall in a construction site, fall in a sewer drain or a manhole. If a manhole covers off, you fall down in there, whatever. Things like that can happen, which they check those sewer systems, I think you mentioned earlier. But yeah, so I did look at that body of water would it be possible? Yes, it would be. And then, but for him not to surface or any existence of him in that water. However, I don't know why I said it like I was a cheerleader just then, but the phone activity, if I read things right, there's no more phone activity after like whatever. Gosh, why do I keep saying that? Let me hit that reset button. I apologize. The phone activity stops that night, right? Like his first or his last transmissions on that night, which would make me think something like that could happen. That he and that phone, everything
stops at once.
Or if somebody had murdered him, they would have had to have done something with that phone at that time, or it just powers off naturally wherever he is and then never comes back on, which would explain that as well.
But then 6 months later, the phone rings when she calls it.
And back to that, the company saying that's a glitch is a little weird to me too.
Yeah.
I don't understand that as a glitch.
It didn't make sense. And all the reports I read about it being a glitch, and I'm not a techie, if you've seen the show before, you know that full well, but nothing made sense to me about it being a glitch when I read it. I couldn't make it make sense. So if you guys,
not with I interrupt you. Go right ahead.
No, you look scared. Like, you're gonna think I rude. Beat you after the show. No, I just think that like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I guess I always look into if you guys see me looking this way, this is me thinking. That's my thing. But I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, well, the phone stuff, normally that's someone powering it back on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or can get it powered back on either through a charger, they find it, something, I don't know. And then it hits for whatever reason, and either they don't mess with it again, or I would assume that.
Unless somebody found it. That's the thing, too. What if it was on the banks of that river? What if it was wherever?
Yeah.
And it's 6 months later, so kind of that's a reasonable time frame, and somebody finds it and turns it on, like just that innocently.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know. Unfortunately, I understand. I think why he did it in the time, but at the time, right, pretty soon after this happened, as soon as Alexis starts kind of making the calls to the family that. She can't find him. They eventually make the missing persons report on that Monday. Brian's father calls around and has all of his stuff suspended, like his cards. So,
people do that, but I would say this is like a announcement here.
Don't do that.
Yeah, if you think someone is missing, you leave all that stuff active
to find
because even if the card's stolen, that's going to give you a lead to the suspect.
Precisely. And that's what he said. And I'm sure if he were to think back on it later, and he said, I was afraid people would have his stuff and spend his money. And it's like, well, okay, well, he's got money. And
a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let's just say a person one time used a missing person's debit card because they knew that person was missing. Like legitimately took their mail, their debit card, knowing it was an ongoing missing person, and used it fraudulently. Isn't that terrible?
Yeah, of course.
That's horrible. But all of a sudden, the activity pops and everybody's like, oh, this person's back up. And then you find out some sorry human being.
Yeah.
So, but always leave stuff active because those companies, it's not a crime. And the person's missing, they'll pull the stuff. And if the card's used somewhere, they can pull. Well, back then, maybe not, but you can pull debit or video from the actual machine or the facility where the debit card's used, and you literally can clear a missing person within a couple of hours just through that. But
well, the only other theory that we're not going to talk about because I'm going on and taking it off the table is some people had the smiley face killers theory, which we can talk about that in and of itself as a whole case one day or a whole show one day. I know your thoughts and feelings on that, but if you guys aren't familiar, there was a string of murders. He would fit the bill in terms of victimology, in one kind of way, but these people were potentially drowned in different things, and there would, be a smiley face next to the body at some point, and then this idea of the smiley face killer or smiley face killers has come, to people's brains, and that's what they've been saying. So people were saying that even if you believe that that's a thing, nothing here indicates that, because there's not a marker that's a smiley face and there's no body. So a serial killer who wants to mark things, if that's what that is, right? Who wants to mark things and have it near a corpse, you wouldn't have a vanished person and no symbol in that case. So that one's, I'm mentioning it just because I see it in every source that I read, but I'm debunking it fully. Yeah. Again, like I said, there's a $100,000 reward that can be given to someone who can lead to the to finding or understanding anything about Brian Shaffer. He was 27 years old at the time of his death in 2006. He was 6 feet 2 inches, 165 pounds, hazel eyes. He has a fleck, like a black fleck in his iris on his left eye and his right upper arm. I put this on Instagram earlier saying, does anybody know that tattoo? He's got the stick figure man from the Pearl Jam single Alive. So big Pearl Jam fan, and that's this little tattoo he's got on his upper right arm. So I'll put those pictures up as well. Again, you can call Central Ohio Crime Stoppers at 645-8477. That's area code 614, or 877-645-8477. What do you think?
Real quickly, that tattoo, that Pearl Jam tattoo, do you think that's from Jeremy? Like if you read the lyrics to Jeremy, his arms raised in a V.
Well, that would make sense, but everything and I don't know, everything I read says that it's from the single Alive, but that would probably make more sense, right? I don't know. I don't remember Alive. I've got to think about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not the biggest Pearl Jam fan, but we've talked about 10 being like one of the greatest albums. Ooh, that's a good one. But when I looked at it, I used to have that t-shirt, by the way.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. Because I was cool. I saw Pearl Jam in concert. Speaking of which, Eddie Vedder actually talked about Brian Shaffer missing at a concert in, was it Cincinnati maybe?
I think we had this conversation before we knew that we were going to be doing this case.
Yeah, but I think stuff like that's pretty cool when musicians get involved because he was such a big fan, and I think that was a way to try to get, information out there and, hey, to try to find him.
So it says that the tattoo is of Jeff, the bass player for Pearl Jam, that he drew it as the part of the album 10, but he said he made 2 tweaks. The stickman's left foot is the map of Michigan in tribute to where I was born, and the body is the Seattle Space Needle representing the place I now call home.
Interesting.
There you go.
I think he played in Mother Love Bone before Pearl Jam.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Well, what say you guys? I don't know. What's your first, if I say, what do you think? Do you think he's alive and living a new life, or do you think something happened to him that night?
I think,
because to me, it's one of those two.
I feel like something happened to him and probably has to do with that. Without being able to see how that river is, I pulled it up on the map a little bit, but it seems like that could explain it. Someone disappearing.
The river thing, though, do you think, unless he got in a car and they drove down and they have a scuffle and whatever, but I feel like we'd see him somehow on some footage, maybe not, but to get like just stumbling out of that bar somehow. So the way the investigators did was they took all the footage from every single person that went into that place that night and every single person that went out of that place that night and made sure that they could literally match each one of them until they had gotten them all matched. The only one that was a little questionable was for a little while a guy they called Orange Shirt Guy or Orange Sweater Guy. And it's because he walked in wearing one thing and came back out wearing a different color shirt. Okay. And while he was in there, he was kind of like a little loitery, just kind of looking around, kind of in and out. But then since they couldn't match him up at first, they were concerned at first that it might be Brian, because they're like, oh, who's this guy wearing this? Okay, yeah. But then it was like, John already mentioned the connection to the smiley face killer, but it's not, because there's no body and no smiley.
So we know somebody wasn't actually listening to the show.
John.
He just logged on and got credit.
He's very likely working.
I'm just being silly.
Got credit. So that, what was I just saying?
Oh, about the orange shirt guy.
Yeah, sorry. So anyway, upon investigating all of this, they talked to him. He actually wound up just being like a cab driver. This is probably why he looked a little like out of sorts, because he would go find his next fare and then just kind of come back and sit and hang out until it was time to go hop back in the cab again.
Get one.
And so
tie one on, go back.
Well, maybe. And so I may have a favorite Uber driver that's known for something similar to that. But and then I guess he just at some point when he was in there, he'd had his sweatshirt with him and put it on, so he leaves in a different color. Some of the theories were that the theories get crazy, and that's why I say if you're the type to get in a Reddit rabbit hole, just be conscientious of what you're reading, because sometimes somebody was like, well, I think maybe if he went to say hello to the band, which there's some hearsay that that's what he said he was going to do. I think that was his Irish goodbye. He was like, peace, I'm going to go talk to the band, and he's sneaking out a back door. But they were like, well, what if he he was drunk? What if he crawled in with the band's equipment, and then I'm like, and then the whole band just hides him for the next 18 years,
well,
or
yeah,
I know. Or there's one that actually more people than you would think have kind of subscribed to this, that something they just take it at such concrete, like such black and white, that he walked in because of the footage and never came out. Right. So he met his demise in there, and that because to avoid liability for the bar, they consented to hide his body. And I'm like, who do you think you're finding working at this bar who's like, yeah, let's just hide the dead guy?
Yeah.
Cook on the line or some 24-year-old bartender's like, oh yeah, let me help you put him in this wall. I don't understand.
Because I'm loyal to the not hot tuna.
Yeah, I know. It's ugly tuna.
Yeah.
I'll put it on Instagram, but there's a picture you can actually see it, Ryan. I didn't load them up tonight, but
I just think without us knowing what the statements were, we know that it says somebody withheld information initially. Mm-hmm. So we don't know what that.
Well, she said, it's like, you know how it's written. Like, she believes likely what's probably happened is that somebody's, and that's probably true. They interviewed over 100 people at the time. We've talked about it all the time. Any other circumstances could be going on to where people don't want to talk. This could be precisely why Clint didn't want to take the polygraph. Clint may be completely complicit in this murder, or he may know nothing about it at all, and he didn't want some certain other things to get out, and so he went on and did that.
Yeah, but then once you get that information of, he did have a person he would go see or whatever, that leads you to a different path where everything may end there, and it may look like this could be a murder kind of thing. I think anytime an agency is still putting information out there in a progression drawing, you know what I mean? Like on the
yeah, because they're still
working it. Yeah. So I do think it's one of those things where people go, well, they just stopped doing what they were doing and then moved on.
I don't believe he started a new life elsewhere for 2 or 3 very specific reasons. I don't think he went from bar to bar to bar drinking that night, had in the back of his head thought, I'm a little stressy. Maybe I want to go to Puerto Rico. He still had plans to go to Miami with his girl on Monday. He had plans to have an after party at his house later that day. He couldn't have configured this escape, I can't imagine, and execute it so flawlessly that 18 years later, we're still wondering where in the world he is, and no one understood any of it. And without his car, and got rides, and got to an airport, and had a ton of cash on him because his bank account's not been used. The $4,600 check that he had for his tuition had not been deposited yet or sent to the college. So I don't think he started a new life. I also don't think that, because in this amount of time, people can, and people have, vanished off the face of the earth and potentially still been alive and done it intentionally. We know that. But I also think in 18 years' time, it's just highly unlikely for a couple of reasons. He could have had an injury. If he's in Puerto Rico, an injury. We'd have hospital records. We'd have any little thing could happen to flub up that plan. And I think one of the things that stuck with me the most is the consideration that he has a young brother who, this was, of all accounts, a pretty tight-knit family, who not only lost his mom, but then now he's going to saddle his little brother with the horrible, question and wondering of him being missing. And then his dad dies. So that wouldn't bring him back for his brother. So it doesn't make sense to me that he disappeared or that he started a new life. It does make a lot more sense to me, unfortunately, that he met with foul play at some point somehow. I don't know where his body went. I think that that's the frustrating part of these things, is that we still just don't have a body. So that's what makes everything crazier, and it makes speculations that much wilder.
Yeah, I know people start speculating. I've never understood that. Like, oh, maybe he's talking to the band. He crawled in the back and rode off with them like it's the kid from Road to Perdition or something. It's like, no, I don't. Where do you come up with that? Like that? That's strange to me. But I do think people, maybe I don't know, their brains just get going that way. It frustrates me. Yeah. And I've spoken on it before when actual detectives start doing it. Mm-hmm. And you physically get angry because you're like, why would you start thinking that?
Right. Well, because now you're going to confirm that.
Yeah, just stick with what you know.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening. You doing good, BC?
I'm doing incredible. It's Monday, and I kept forgetting that.
It's so weird. You guys, we're not on a Monday schedule. It's just, like I said, we've got another thing to do tomorrow night, so we can't be doing the show, but I prefer to do it live than not, just because it's fun if we can even last minute get a few of you guys in there just to chit chat. Hey, Marine's Blood, he says, wait, a Monday stream, when did this start? It didn't. You're seeing things. We got Change Gang podcast here, Salamander's here, Jonathan from Com Center is here. You guys say hello to Jonathan. It's National, I don't know, Telecommunication Emergency People Week. It's 911 Dispatcher Week. I'm sure it includes a lot more people. Whatever I say, it's gonna be the wrong thing. But yeah. So you good? You looking forward to summertime?
Yes. If you're watching YouTube, look at that sunburn I've got.
That's
not really. Like. My camera's like I'm
it
bright
does look
red.
Like you've got a sunburn.
Oh yeah. It looks like straight rock lobster. No. Today was incredible.
Warm weather.
Walk, yes. Warm weather. Feel the sun. That's all I want now. Just wants to be at the beach.
I know. You have any plans this summer?
I don't know. Might watch some TV.
Okay.
I'll catch up on Gilligan's Island.
Cool.
Do you have plans this summer?
I was just wondering.
Do you want to hang out some, maybe?
We can hang out some.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we'll go get a Big Mac or something. I heard the McRib's coming back.
Oh, God. Okay.
I'm going to buy you a big McRib.
It. Okay.
Yeah? No.
No.
Come on. I'm going to get you a Pizza Hut personal pan pizza.
Look, they're going to be falling off.
Okay.
John says he's got 4 shows. I think John has 17 shows. Busiest man in podcasting right there. We got...
He says he has a policeman question. Well, just ask it.
What is it, Jonathan? What's your policeman question? Oh, goodness. All right. Well, you guys... what's your question?
Are we on a time delay? Is that what's going on?
No. I think he's just messing with us.
Yeah. I'm waiting for the question.
We had James Barber in here earlier. I don't know where he went.
Yeah, I don't know either.
So Big Macs, that's all you got going on?
What do you got going on?
Nothing.
Come on. I bet you got something going on.
No?
No. Well, okay. We should go. I mean, at least let's go catch a concert. Will you go see a band play with me?
Yes.
I said, would you go see a band play with me? I mixed up my sentence structure.
John is asking, I heard you.
What? Okay. What
He's asking you if you eat Coke and peanuts.
Yes. It's Coke and, Pepsi for me.
Oh.
Yeah. I used to prime tobacco. And at 10 o'clock, we talked about this. You get a snack from the boss man. So I'd get a soft drink.
He said, or do you think that is a crime?
No, it's not a crime. You pour the peanuts in it, tip it upside down with your thumb in the bottom. Boom.
Oh, I'm aware.
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, John, Pepsi. Taste of the Carolinas.
I have to side on the other side. Well, we've had this. It's a long-standing. It's maybe the biggest disagreement ever.
It is.
I can't do Pepsi.
How? Okay, but we agree
flatter
that
and it's sweeter.
What is the greatest soft drink of all?
Diet Coke.
Diet Coke.
I like Diet Coke.
I thought you were going to say Tab or something.
Oh, cherry Diet
I thought it was
Coke.
Dr. Pepper.
Oh, that's the best burping Coke.
Yeah, it is. And you don't like cheer wine, do you? You're not a big fan of the cheer wine?
Jonathan just said cheer wine. I like the idea that cheer wine existed.
Cheer wine is incredible.
I think it's he said it. It's Taste of the Carolinas. It's everybody loves cheer wine that loves cheer wine. It's a cool logo.
Yeah, it is. Cheer wine is good.
Well, okay, to be fair, when I was a kid, I did like cheer wine, but I don't know that I could do it now. I think it's very...
Oh, yeah. If I drank it right now, it tastes like straight syrup.
Yeah.
No.
Cheer wine Krispy Kreme. Oh, my God.
What is John saying? They had a cheer wine Krispy Kreme variant.
That's what it says. It tastes like you're eating a melted donut.
Have you ever seen people that eat the Krispy Kremes with the hamburger bun, like a hamburger?
Yeah, like it is the bun.
Like it's the bun. Yeah. Oh, I'd be sick. I think now in my day when I was in the gutter, with the sweets, I would
Off
eat
the wagon.
so many Krispy Kremes in a row that I had somebody have to stop me one time. I was telling a story at work, and I had about 6 or 7 Krispy Kremes back to back, and I just lost my camera.
Are you gone again? Oh,
Yes.
Look at you! Look at how you're frozen.
I'm all frozen.
Okay, well, I will say, it looks like you're waiting patiently on every word.
Look at that cheer wine face.
Oh my God! Oh,
I'm
you're back, I think. Okay, all right, you guys.
I gotta look this way.
Gosh,
All
I think you've been drinking cheer wine tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't like.
All right.
I'm ready for the summer though.
I know. I'm ignoring you. All right. Well, I hope y'all have a good week. Thank y'all for tuning in. I will put all the pictures and all the stuff up on Instagram later. And next week we will be back at our regular time at 8/7 Central on Tuesday night, as far as I know, unless something else comes up. But that's the plan. But I really do appreciate you guys, and I hope y'all have a great week. I hope you have a great week.
I hope you have a great week.
Thank you very much. All right, this time we can say we will see y'all next Tuesday.